Hi friend, I'm twin number 3, also known as Jonathan. Thank you very much for checking out this video. I'd like to share with you an experience that I had several years ago. Well, I think I'd like to. I've thought about doing this video for a few months. I've done several takes. I can anticipate some negative reactions, but what happened, and I could see some benefits from sharing this experience. For one thing, if you've had a similar experience, then you'll know that you're not the only one. In addition, it was a very positive experience, and in a world with a lot of negativity, it's good to know that there are some positive spiritual experiences. Finally, it might be helpful for me to share this with you. I don't know whether I need to follow this up or how to go about doing that if I should. So maybe you'll have some ideas and I welcome them from you. Here's a little bit of background about me, just to set the stage. I had a totally monotheistic background and I had never really questioned that at all. Furthermore, I'm trained as a research scientist. I'm used to thinking in very factual, analytical ways. I had always been extremely skeptical of any kind of what I might call New Age phenomena. I think that I'll just tell you what did happen, and then, if there's time at the end, tell you a little bit about how I understand it now. Several years ago, I moved to a new state. I did not know this state well at all. I could not have named 5 towns in it, and I knew the names of no counties other than the ones I drove through when I was moving in. Several months after I moved here, I had a dream. The dream was fairly strange. I saw an outline of the state. There was a hand with the index finger extended, pointing to a particular place within the outline, and I heard, I guess telepathically, someone repeat the name Morgan several times. That was the whole dream. A couple of days later I thought about this, and just out of curiosity I got out a road map and looked, and right where the finger was pointing there was a Morgan County. I'd had no idea that it was there. I did eventually drive up and look around there, and nothing stood out to me really. Well, that was that, and then several weeks later I had another dream. It consisted of even less, just a single word. And that began a pattern. In fact, I began to just keep paper next to the bed. I would dream a word or a short phrase, often in languages I did not know. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, write that down, then go back to sleep. The next day I'd run a search online. And invariably, within the first 3 items that came up on the search, there would be something that referred to a goddess. There were all kinds of goddesses, ones from Anglo-Saxon and Celtic and Norse and Egyptian and other pantheons. Sometimes they were names, sometimes they were things that referred to some detail about the worship of the goddess or some detail from the goddess's life. This was very strange to me. I've never studied mythology. I actually never really had any interest in it. I don't think I've spent 2 minutes in my life prior to that thinking about goddesses at all. So I didn't know why I was having dreams about goddesses, but I just wrote them down and then went on with my life. Well, this went on for maybe a year and a half. In the meantime, I had decided to take up meditation. Meditation's one of those things that I always thought would be good for me, and I tried it maybe 1 or 2 days, and then I'd forget about it for 6 months or so. But I decided that I would meditate for 30 minutes every day for a year. I tried meditations that did not involve blanking out at all, but rather really focusing attention. I thought this would be good for me, that it might make me a little sharper or more observant of details. So I chose 2 meditations. One is to look at a candle flame until you can see the colors that normally people pay no attention to outside the flame itself. There's a red layer, a black layer, a blue one, for example. And just to have some variety, I also used a mantra meditation as well. And the goal there was to simply softly pronounce the syllables and pay attention only to the sound of the syllables. The particular mantra that I used is Rib Bueno Shel Olam. This is Hebrew for something like first cause of the universe. So yeah, I was sticking pretty close to my monotheistic roots. After about 5 or 6 weeks of meditating, one night I was sitting upright in a chair. I was very much awake, but just resting a little bit. I had my eyes closed. Focusing like that is really quite tiring, actually. And as I was sitting there, a series of images just raced by. It was something like seeing isolated frames from a movie. There were enough of them, though, to piece together what was happening, and I knew this was nothing that had ever happened to me. I was seeing things from the perspective of someone who might be about 3 years old. So at one point I looked down at my feet and I had little red canvas shoes on. At another point I looked up at the underside of a bathroom sink. As this unfolded, I realized that something had occurred that had been quite traumatic to someone. I also realized that what had happened had not been intended to be malicious or harmful, that the person had misinterpreted what had happened. And I had a fairly good idea of who this went with. It belonged to a friend of mine. We had been friends for a long time. At this point we lived in different places, but we talked on the phone fairly often. And I was able to sneak in a few questions like, did you ever live in a house that had such and such a pattern on the bathroom floor? Or the rooms were in certain positions relative to each other. And he said, yeah, that was the house I lived in until I was 6 years old. Strangely, he didn't ask me, how do you know that? I guess he thought he had just told me at some point, although they were fairly silly details. So what I learned was I could meditate and then sometimes see things or just know things. In the case of my friend, this was quite important because what had happened to him when he was about 3 years old was affecting his life now. Now, a couple of months before this incident, something very disturbing happened with this friend. We had been talking quite a lot on the phone, and sometime within a 48-hour period, he did a total change of personality, and it was a change much for the worse. A couple of weeks before that change, he had called me one night. He was very upset, and he kept saying that he felt like he was losing himself or he was disappearing, and I had no idea really what he was talking about. We decided it must be some stress and pretty much let it go at that. But 2 weeks later, he was a very different person. I thought at first this might be dissociative identity disorder, what people call multiple personalities. And I talked to several people who specialize in that field, and they all agreed that's not what it was. Of course, you can't diagnose at a distance, but some things just did not add up. So I was very concerned about him. I wanted to help. I seemed to be at a dead end. I had no idea of what to do. In the meantime, I had learned that I could, often at will, go into a state where I could journey, where I could see things that were happening somewhere else, or get some information. So I decided to do that one night to see if I could find out anything that might help this friend of mine. And I don't recall coming back with any information that was useful. However, immediately after that, something happened that explained all those goddess dreams. I'm sorry to have to stop here, but please look for part 2. Thank you.